Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of On the Beat. I'm Tony Olivero here with my fellow men's basketball beat writers Andrew John and Brett LoGiurato, previewing Syracuse's regular season finale. This weekend, Saturday, they're going to take on Big East bottom feeder DePaul. Just in preparation for the game, I'm going to touch on three things. One with the DePaul game, one recapping Rick Jackson on senior day, and also looking forward to the Big East tournament with the St. John's loss tonight. Syracuse secures a double bye, something that seemed out of the question just a few weeks ago. But to start things off, the DePaul game's first up. And she's going to go against this team, DePaul, who's probably the worst team in the Big East. But their kind of trademark is what Oliver Purnell has brought over from Dayton and Clemson. This press with the point man all the way up at the front. Andrew, what do you expect this weekend from the Oliver Purnell press? How can SU handle it? Brandon, Trish, and Scoop Jardine especially. Jardine was shaky in the Villanova game. Me and you were both at the end of both halves with some passes. But also, can SU maybe use this to spur their own attack and really pull away right out of the gates?
Yeah, I mean, we saw a similar attack that, as you mentioned, Villanova had. They were able to really cause quite a few turnovers at the end of the first half, and even at the end of the second half there against Syracuse. It'd be interesting to see how much success DePaul was able to have. They obviously had a lot of success against Providence and Villanova recently. They didn't have success against some other teams. They got blown out pretty bad. That will be an interesting storyline to see how exactly SU is able to handle that. They haven't handled the press very well this year, so that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and it's a press unlike probably anything Syracuse has seen. These guys who are on the team have been here for a few years. Purnell brings that press where you have that point man. At Clemson, James Mays was kind of that main guy with the length. They forced some national championship teams in North Carolina and Duke to turn the ball over at Clemson. Obviously, he has completely different horses running it at DePaul with a lot of freshmen, much smaller, but still, it'd be interesting to see how Brandon, Trish, and Scoop Jardine handled the press. Rutgers, Mike Coburn, in the first half when they played DePaul, was forced into 9 turnovers. Rick Jackson, senior day. This is pretty much the end for him at the Carrier Dome. He's been dominant all year. Jim Boeheim has made the point that he is the best two-sided player, offense, defense, the Big East has seen all year, even though you get the likes of Hansbrough and Hardy and Kemba Walker in the talks for Player of the Year. I guess, what do you expect out of this game? I'm sure it's much more of the same, but looking back on this season especially, what did Rick Jackson bring to this team?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good send-off for him and for everything he's accomplished in 4 years at Syracuse. He kind of came in as, with Dante Green, with Scoop Jardine, with Johnny Flynn, and he was a little bit of an afterthought in that class, and he's worked his way up to where he is now, which is the MVP of this team. And I thought kind of the most telling thing about Rick Jackson was that last week in Georgetown, Jim Boeheim gets to his press conference, and he's like, he didn't even play that well. He had 12 points and 7 rebounds, and I mean, that's a good game for anyone else, but not Rick Jackson. So it just speaks volumes about where he is now, and I only expect more of the same on senior day for him against a pretty undersized DePaul team.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. I mean, were there games where he played poorly? Yes, the first Georgetown game comes to mind. But what he was able to do somewhat unexpectedly this year, I mean, even on Noon's Magician today, Sean Keeley wrote that they didn't even think of having him on their front cover. Us at the Daily On Sheet, he was kind of an afterthought with the coverage initially to begin the year, and then he blows up to become unequivocally the MVP of this team. So, hats off to Rick Jackson just with regards to what he was able to bring to the team this year, kind of a little bit out of nowhere, even if he was the center. And even upstairs, we got that new Kids on the Block basketball guide cover from a few years ago, and you got Christoph Agenat in there, you got Johnny Flynn in there, you got Dante Green in there, you got Scoop Jardine in there. All 4 were thought well, kind of way above Rick in that class. Also, there was Sean Williams too. But at the end of the day, in terms of value, obviously Johnny Flynn's up there, but Rick Jackson can stake his claim. Last thing we'll talk about: St. John's loses tonight to Seton Hall, someone unexpectedly in a heated game. Now Syracuse ensures themselves what looked like an unexpected double bye. They will start on Thursday instead of Wednesday, playing at 2 p.m. Most likely against the 5 seed St. John's if they get there past their first round game. Andrew, you watched the Seton Hall St. John's game tonight. Obviously Syracuse kind of played well against St. John's to begin the year, but what specifically does that double bye mean? Last year it hurt SU, perhaps maybe not as much as the Inter Inawaku injury there at the end, but how does that come into play? And maybe just forecasting St. John's a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to affect them because, as you mentioned, last year they they had the double bye, and then they lost to Georgetown. Who Georgetown was able to get on a little bit of a roll there. You know, not having the double bye that Syracuse had. Sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can be bad. You know, the players were a little bit mixed about that this week. And, you know, I think that heading into this game against St. John's, it's going to be a challenge if, in fact, that is how the matchups shake out.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, there's still some games to be played until then. But if they end up playing St. John's, you have a team that they beat fairly handily earlier in the year. This is a team that is, you know, is much different. The St. John's team is much different than the team that SU faced earlier in the year. They're battle tested. They have obviously a lot of veteran experience there. I think it'll be real tough for Syracuse if that is how things shake out. You know, it'll be a good challenge for them heading into the NCAA tournament.
I think the one thing you can extract from all this with the double bye, and you touch on it in the article that'll appear tomorrow in our edition of In the Paint. Be sure to pick it up. You know, previewing the DePaul game for this weekend, injuries-wise. Obviously, SU's hobbled a little bit. Brandon Triss even said to you that he thought he broke his leg on that one play in the Georgetown game. Even that one day, providing them, you know, and then it's not only one day; it's kind of like a 2-for-1, where you won't have to go, you know, that extra day all the way to Saturday if you want to go all the way there. We saw it a few years ago, the 6 overtime game. It's kind of a 2-for-1, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And just overall, you know, this team is hobbled, and you know, we'll see what happens.
And I think it's interesting to think about the 2006 season when Jerry McNamara's senior year, when he led them through the Big East tournament, winning 4 games in 4 days, and then of course they went and they got upset in the first round of the NCAA tournament. I think it was because kind of what we've been talking about is the team was, especially Jerry McNamara, was so hobbled from making that run and getting there. So I think the double bye does help Syracuse because that's just less game time that they have to actually battle through, and ultimately it'll save them a little bit in the NCAA tournament.
So that one loss that happened in Newark tonight, it could play out huge, not even just the Big East tournament, but the NCAA tournament as well. Be sure to check back in Saturday, dailyarms.com. Also follow us on Twitter. We'll be providing coverage live from the game. Brett and I will be there at the Dome for Rick Jackson's send-off, Syracuse's final regular season game of the year. For Brett and Andrew, thanks guys.